Good afternoon, and I want to welcome everyone for taking part and participating in today's town hall discussion here at FIU, a discussion about diversity, unity, and action. Today is June 5th, 2020. My name is Pablo Ortiz, and I have the honor and privilege of serving as today's moderator for the town hall. And I also have the privilege of serving as Vice President of Regional and Academic Locations and Vice Provost for the Biscayne Bay campus at our FIU. And I also must mention I'm a proud graduate of this great institution. I want to take a moment to first thank Willard Shepard from NBC6 for moderating a powerful conversation this past Wednesday with a distinguished group of panelists. Willard mentioned a couple of things that I found very powerful. And he said that these conversations allow us to use thought and brain power to bring about change. And that is our expectation today, is that we hope that this conversation allows us to continue to bring about the change that's so necessary. Before we get started, I'd like to ask everyone to please take a moment and participate in a moment of silence and pause to respect those who have died needlessly around the country and to honor George Floyd and his family. I thank you for that. I also want to mention that we will be participating in a university-wide moment of silence on Tuesday, June 9th at 11 a.m. And we encourage everyone who is participating in today's town hall to take part in that moment of silence. It will be for the full 8 minutes and 46 seconds. And we invite everyone, as I said, to participate. And also, if you have a chance and you've driven by FIU, we are flying our flags half-staff as a sign of respect and unity for such challenging times. So in the next couple of hours, we intend to have an honest and thought-provoking discussion with FIU leaders representing the institution abroad. We have leadership from administration, from faculty, and students, and we are here to talk about where we are and where we need to be. You know, it was once said that justice will not be served until those who are unaffected are as outraged by those who are. Today's town hall is about awareness, understanding, community, listening, and most importantly, unity in action. Everyone participating in this town hall has been affected differently by the recent and tragic events across this country. It is through open and honest dialogue that we can make change. But this will not happen with only one conversation. It requires ongoing efforts to reach the point where we as a nation have protected and provided justice for all. Today is just the first in a series of town halls that will be conducted here at FIU to provide a platform for ongoing conversations on how we can and must be better. So with that, let me first thank our President, Mark Rosenberg, for his insistence and persistence in providing these platforms and opportunities for us to come together as an FIU community and family. So to get us started, it is my pleasure and honor to introduce to you the 5th President of Florida International University, Mark B. Rosenberg.
Thank you, Dr. Ortiz. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for being with us on this Friday that brings with it so many difficulties that we have gone through, but also the promise and the hope of a better tomorrow. You will note that the conversation is titled Diversity, Unity, and Action. And I want to speak to the action that our institution knows can be carried out. I'm going to present to you very briefly a set of suggestions and or approaches that, among others that may be suggested during this conversation, we might discuss, we might unify around, and we might implement as a means by which to seek the permanent victories that are going to be so important to ensure that one day, hopefully soon, we will never have to have a gathering like this again. I want to remind you that our FIU, we see ourselves as a solution center. We see ourselves as a force for good. We see ourselves as a values-driven institution, and we suffer from optimistic urgency. We want to get things done. And there's no more urgent set of questions that we confront for our community than the issue of enduring institutional racism and social equity. So let me turn to a few of the ideas that I want to share with you, and then listen to others, because I'm really here to listen about the kinds of things that we should be doing. Please, let's go to the next slide. Okay, I want to first of all address directly the issue of police reform. Let me ask Chief Alex Casas to talk about the first point in this list. I'm not going to go through the entire list. I'm just going to go through a few selective points. And on the police reform issue, the first point I think is most important. Chief Casas.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Rosenberg, for allowing me the opportunity to answer that question. And to your point, yes, that first point is important. We talk about action and things we can do. One of the things that has come out of this tragedy, this horrible incident, is unlike ever before, I've seen the leadership in South Florida law enforcement galvanize and condemning those actions. And we recognize this is an opportunity for us to engage our community in a sustainable manner moving forward. And one of the things that our new president of the Miami-Dade Chiefs Association of Chiefs of Police has proposed is to create an advisory council where we bring community members from the South Florida law enforcement community, not specific to one department, but at large in a broader scope, so we can, as leadership in South Florida law enforcement, listen to their concerns, collaborate on approaches, understand the things that they need for us to do, explain to them how we need to do certain things, and have a collaborative approach on how to better maintain, not just build, but maintain good community relations so that we have those things in existence before the tragedy, not after the tragedy. One of the challenges that we've had in the past is to do it in a way that you can sustain it in an ongoing basis. And I'm very happy to know that this Chiefs Association wants to do that now, and that FIU has committed to be a part of that, not just your police department, but FIU itself, with academic support to taking a look at policies and involving some of our student groups as part of the community outreach in this.
Thank you, Chief. There are other elements there. Happy to discuss those during the rest of the program. Let me now switch to community. As it relates to our community, we believe it's very important, these items that are listed, we believe it's very important that we be involved in providing just-in-time community training and skills to expand job opportunities. As you know, this economy is rapidly shifting, and the demand for newer and better skill sets is pervasive at all levels. Our university must be engaged in providing these opportunities to our entire community. Next. Access to higher education. We think it's important to fund the expansion of bridge programs into local bridge programs throughout the community into FIU and other local colleges and universities. The research is very clear. It shows that bridge programs are the best way to ensure that eligible high school graduates are fully prepared for the challenges of college and university education. So we will see an expansion, we will take on an expansion of bridge programs for our FIU. Access. Here, as it relates to FIU, the expansion of bridge programs, the expansion of quality online university instruction for eligible students. This includes students not only in the college and university level, but in the high school level. We are very committed to expanding internships programs that provide additional skills to our students, and we're eager to provide even more scholarship funding for eligible low-income students that covers not only tuition, that's our Golden Scholars program, but also covers on-campus housing. Here, I want to make sure that we understand that the university itself can do more. We understand that. And so therefore, we're very interested in finding ways to more aggressively promote small minority business contracting with the university. There are many, many opportunities that we are able to take advantage of with some tweaks here and there of regulations, as well as a more aggressive community education effort. We know that many small and medium-sized businesses could be more intimately linked to our university, and we will focus on finding ways to make that happen. We're also interested, among other things, in insisting on state support for expanded Pell enrollments at each of our public universities and at our state colleges. We also believe that aggressive development of short courses is necessary to foster greater awareness of and responses to institutional racism and social inequities, and those short courses would be directed at our professional staff, at our faculty, at our students, and they would be made available for community learners. We're also going to be pursuing an aggressive review of our curriculum to foster greater awareness of institutional racism, social equity, and the generation of and amelioration of disparities. As the superintendent of schools, Alberto Carvalho, has repeatedly said that education gaps lead to opportunity gaps, which lead to income gaps. We grasp that, and we intend to be more aggressive in working on closing those gaps. Also, we're going to pursue a more aggressive grow your own talent development initiative at each level through programs such as the National Science Foundation AGEP grant and others. And here I asked the provost to speak to that in particular. Provost.
Thank you, Mr. President. As the Chief Academic Officer of the university, I'm very happy to say that we've taken on a number of initiatives. I'm actually a PI on a National Science Foundation institutional transformation grant, where we've got a number of initiatives where we're trying to increase the diversity of our faculty. And I work closely with Jörg Reinhold, the chair of the Faculty Senate, on how courses are delivered in the classroom. And we do very well in terms of diversity of our students, but our diversity of our faculty has been lagging behind. And so I won't go through all the different initiatives that we're doing, but one of the programs that we have developed through this grant is something called a diversity mentorship program. And this allows us to recruit senior faculty that are already tenured that can come in and be mentors for other minority faculty. We also have a distinguished postdoc program. So some of our own graduates can move into a distinguished postdoc program and eventually, hopefully, become a faculty member. Most recently, it's a brand new program, but we do this year, this fall, we will have a new STEM professor in biology who is African-American male coming out of that postdoc program. And we have hired 2 additional diversity mentor professorships in the last couple of years. And I'm happy to announce that I discussed this with the president today, and we're going to hire 10 additional diversity mentor professorships over the next few years. And so that's we piloted this program. We know it works. So we're committed to adding at least 10 additional of these diversity mentor professors over the next few years. Thank you.
You're on mute, Mr. President.
Thank you. Thank you. That concludes my presentation. Obviously, there's more there, including federal initiatives that I believe are important, but we're really here to listen and to get even more ideas that we can digest and then come up with a specific action plan for our university as it relates to our community as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. In seeing and reading these slides, I think everyone can see that FIU is already taking action, and we're developing a plan moving forward. And I think that's critically important for us as a community to see what the next steps are. So before we get started, let me just go through a couple of housekeeping items. First of all, I'm very happy to announce that we have close to 800 participants on today's town hall meeting, and we certainly hope that you get something valuable and a lot of insight after today's conversation. Today, as I mentioned, is an opportunity for students, faculty, and staff to express what's in your hearts and in your minds at this crucial time in our nation's history. So we look forward to trying to answer all of your questions. So you have a number of ways that your questions will be answered today to the extent possible. There's a Q&A function that we have as part of the Zoom call. You can certainly submit your questions. Some of those questions will be answered live on the actual Zoom chat, on the question and answer chat. Other questions we'll bring to the panelists so that they can answer as part of their conversations as well. So feel free to submit those questions and or comments. And we ask that you try to keep them as succinct as possible so that we can get through as many of those questions as we can. So today, by the way, the discussion is being live streamed on the Facebook page, on FIU's Facebook page, and is being recorded as well, and will be available later on news.fiu.edu. So we're going to get started, and before we do that, I want to first introduce our panelists. As I mentioned, these are leaders from across the institution representing administration, faculty, and students, and we're very happy to have them take time and be part of this conversation. As the president said, all very interested and willing to learn more and to understand what we can do better as a university. As you've already heard from the president, we also have our provost, Kenneth Furton. We have Elizabeth Behar, Senior Vice President of Academic and Student Affairs. We have Chief Alexander Casas for the Chief of FIU Police. We also have with us Elpanya Hudson. She's Vice President of Human Resources. We have Vice President Saif Ishouf for Engagement. Sherlon McWhorter, Title IX Coordinator for Human Resources, has joined us as well. Jorg Reinhold, Chair, Faculty Senate, and Professor of Physics at the College of Arts, Sciences, and Education is with us. And then our three outstanding student leaders. We have Artrice Shepard, President of the Black Student Union. We have Alexandra Valdez, President of our Student Government Association. And we also welcome Benny Williams, member of Alpha Phi Alpha, as well on the call. So now that you've met the panelists, we're going to start with the first questions. And as I pose the first questions to the panelists, I ask that you spend a moment introducing yourself so that the audience can get a sense as to who you are and what you do. And then we can go ahead and begin answering those questions. And the questions I'm asking are a compilation of questions that were asked during Wednesday's conversation that maybe were not answered at the time, but we certainly wanted to revisit those today, and questions that are popping up on our Q&A chat as we go through today's town hall. So the first one, Mr. President, I'm going to put you back on the spot. You mentioned there are other initiatives and other movements that are taking place both at the local, state, and as well now at the federal level. And one of the questions came from one of our students. Actually, the statement was, as the largest university in South Florida, one of the largest universities in the country, how do you see is FIU's position or responsibility when it comes to helping create the kind of change that we're talking about, how to bring a community together at the broader picture where you see higher education playing a role in such an important conversation and moment in our country's history?
Well, good question. I've often said that as an institution, part of our organizational culture has been, and I've been with the institution almost since its inception, is that we've never asked for a lighter load. We've just asked for broader shoulders. And in this instance, we do see ourselves, we know we're an anchor institution in the community. We know that the leadership increasingly of this community comes from our FIU. We understand that position and that opportunity creates responsibilities for us. And we've never run from the challenges that we have had. So I see us leading by example. I think that's very important. I think the community expects that and wants that from us. And that's why we have already begun to share with the community ideas and initiatives, and we want action. And we're going to lead by example on that.
Thank you for that, Mr. President. I'm gonna turn the conversation now to the Chief, Chief Casas, and as you, I'm sure, understand and recognize, a great number of questions are directed in terms of our police, the FIU police, and certainly we saw the slide that shared some of the initiatives that you are engaged in, not only within the FIU population, but as well as abroad with the community and some of the work that's being done. But the questions mainly for you, Chief, if you'd like to take a few minutes to answer, are regarding safety and training, right? And those are really the two big themes that we're seeing with a lot of these questions. So, you know, in terms of safety, a lot of the students are asking, what is it that FIU Police Department is doing to ensure that students are safe? That not only when they come back in the fall, but in semesters to come, in their full experience at FIU, what kinds of actions are the police preparing to do to ensure that our students they feel safe, that they are not subjected to any unfair or unlawful treatment, that they feel that there's the confidence in the police department that they will work closely with them and actually enhance and support their experience, as opposed to any type of negative experiences that we're seeing out there.
Thanks, Dr. Ortiz. As an FIU alum myself, being in law enforcement for 30 years now, I have a little bit of a special place for FIU, unlike maybe some other chiefs may have for the departments, because I feel that these very much are my students. One thing that FIU PD has already done over the years and will continue to do so, and part of our challenge is, as our student body continues to change, it's almost like you have to make them aware that these things are available or that we're doing these things. We can talk about how safe FIU is, but if our student body doesn't feel safe, it's all for naught. So one of the things that FIU has done and will continue to do is to engage our students, particularly our student groups. We find it very effective to go through our student groups and be able to connect with them and talk to them and have dialogues with them, identify issues of concern to them. Another thing that we're trying to do very hard here at our police department is hire a police force that looks like them. We want, as people walk through the Graham Center, as our officers walk through the library, that they see themselves in that officer and that they'll feel comfortable approaching them and talking to them. You mentioned training as one of those things. You know, we're talking about police reform and the type of training that we should be doing. One of the advantages of being a smaller department is we can drive our training process a little bit better. A lot of times police departments in South Florida and around the country, you focus very much on tactics. Well, here at FIU, we also give an equal importance to what we call a soft side of the table, human diversity training, autism awareness training, LGBTQ plus training, all the types of trainings that make our officers more comfortable with communities that maybe in the past they haven't interacted with, so that initial interaction, that comfort level will exist between the officer and that student. So we've been able to increase our training and try to conduct hiring practices to kind of make us a more diverse police department.
Thank you, Chief, for that. And I appreciate you jumping also into the conversation around training, which, as I mentioned, a lot of questions about any new training, or do you feel there's any training missing that the police officers in the past have not received that are now going to be critical moving forward? And is that something that's being developed for FIU, or is that part of a broader a training plan or planning a training schedule that the FIU Police Department will be going through?
So every year at FIU, we identify our training needs for the year. What are our priorities? All too often, we give a lot of attention to things like active shooter training, but we don't highlight some of the other types of trainings that we do. We've already sat down this year, even before this tragedy occurred, and before the pandemic occurred, and sat down and identified our training. What do we need to be trained in this year? And one thing that we realized is, while the Florida Department of Law Enforcement mandates X number of hours to maintain our police certification every 2 years, every 4 years, we recognize that we can do something to increase that amount of training. So, you know, we talk about human diversity training, about communication training, cultural awareness training. But one of the things that we've increased training in the last 2 to 3 years that I'm can't be more proud of being able to say that we're doing this, is we're actually training our officers on how to de-escalate. All too often in our police academies and in law enforcement, there's that culture of show up and control the situation. But we have lacked very much in training our officers to, once you have control, to de-escalate, to now take a step back and maintain what should be a positive outcome. Well, here at FIU, we have done a significant amount of de-escalation training, integrating communication with tactics. So it's not just showing up and take control with the use of force. It's show up, assess the situation, and take control with whatever skill set you have, whether it's a verbal skill set, some type of intermediate, some intermediate tactic, or unfortunately the most extreme case. But giving officers options and teaching them the skills to how to back down and how to de-escalate.
Thank you for that response, Chief. So I'd like to spend a few more minutes on this topic of training, because oftentimes we hear about training and it's solely focused on the police force, right? And police officers that need training. But we've also seen questions, and we've had those conversations, that the training extends beyond just one particular department, as in the police force that we have. But there's also training that's needed at the faculty level as well, at the staff level as well. So I'm going to pass it over to our Vice President of Human Resources, Opanya Hudson, as well as our Chair of the Faculty Senate, Jörg Reinhold, to talk a little bit about what conversations are taking place at the faculty level in terms of training and professional development that we are looking at, or that are going to be implemented, and how that's going to impact our FIU community.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much, Dr. Ortiz. It is a pleasure to sit here with this esteemed panel of university and student leaders as Vice President for the 4th largest university in the nation. I think that's a big deal. But I tell you what, in addition to being privileged to sit here, I sit here with mental exhaustion, right? With internal conflict as a Black woman, born at Mount Sinai Hospital in Miami, reared in Liberty City, also a graduate of Miami Northwestern Senior High, then educated at 3 of the major universities here in Florida, to ultimately have earned a master's degree only to see myself today perplexed and haunted by the recent deaths of Mr. George Floyd and of Miss Breonna Taylor, who looked like me and warranted no justified reason for their deaths. So, while unfortunately we've seen many such deaths in our Black community that have not risen to the platform of public discourse as this time is different. It's different. And this time the curtains have been drawn back, and the world has been able to see what a person like me has had to learn to navigate through every day. So with that, I'm so grateful that our FIU is hosting this conversation. And this one, and not only this one, but all the uncomfortable ones that may follow. I'm grateful for the leadership of our president, Dr. Rosenberg, the leadership of our provost, Dr. Furton, and all the senior leaders, and their authenticity in this, what we're doing today and what we'll be doing forward. I'm grateful for each of you that made a point to participate in today's town hall, and I appreciate the opportunity to lend my voice as we have this discussion. One of the questions that came, Dr. Ortiz, that you talked about was, can states mandate certifications or professional development that involve courses in humanitarianism? So what I say to that is, of course, continual education and professional development are at the core of combating ignorance and misunderstanding. At the state level, the Department of Business and Professional Regulation requires certifications for certain professions such as nail techs, massage therapists, real estate agents, and such to be certified. In theory, that same department or other accrediting groups can require certifications for industries such as law and accounting, medicine, and pharmacy, and they can require, but accreditations at the state level have to be tied to preparing a professional for a particular job. But on a broader scale, individuals can contribute to righting state, local, and national wrongs by taking personal responsibility. That doesn't need a certification, right? Participate in our voting process, unseat individuals who espouse systemic racism and discrimination. I'm really inspired by the collective voices across the world that have, spoken out and are involved in peaceful protesting and making our voices heard. because that's what it's going to take to oppose the systemic racism. Certainly locally, we have a robust professional development platform for faculty and staff. With this incident, we're even creating more pointed professional development opportunities that our employees can take advantage of, that are not just checking the box, but are really engaging us in the real conversations that are going to make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Opanye. Jorg, would you like to add to that?
Sure. First, let me introduce myself, what my role here is. I'm the representative of the faculty, so I'm the chair of the Faculty Senate. And you should not expect that I have all the answers that you might have right now, but what I'm looking for from you is especially also things and questions. What can we do? What can we as the faculty, what would you like me to bring back to the faculty that we can do as actions, not necessarily just as statements, but as concrete actions that you would like to see from the faculty? Throw them into the question and answer. I assume I can get to them back later. The question that I think that really thrown at me was about the training aspects. The provost already mentioned to you some of the things that we're doing. One of them, for example, is that all faculty on hiring committees have to take training, and that is meant to combat also implicit bias in the hiring decisions. The goal is to make our faculty more representative to what our student population actually is. Another training thing that is happening right now, which is related to a question I saw also in the question and answer, was about student mental health, and especially the mental health of Black students that have these constant stressors. And one thing that is going on right now is that we're trying to train the faculty in being able to recognize when they should have conversations with students, to direct them to the right services that we have on campus. So these are some of the training activities that are going right now on. I saw a number of other questions in there, and I'm trying to type my answers in there. If you are submitting something anonymous and you would like me to respond to you directly, send me an email, please, as well, that if you would like me to get back to you with respect to the faculty. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Reinhold. Yes, and we're capturing all of the questions that are being asked on the Q&A, and we'll certainly be trying to answer those as we go, and even beyond today's conversation. So you brought up an interesting point in terms of what's available to the students and what kind of support is available to the students. So I'd like to turn to Dr. Behar as our Senior Vice President of Academic and Student Affairs. One of the questions that had come in was, will our counseling and psychological services be offering services to Black students in particular that have been affected by the movement and by what's happening? What other services available? We're seeing on the feed a lot of questions about where can students turn to, what is available to them. Maybe Dr. Behar, you would like to spend a little bit of time of that. I know that Opanye Hudson wanted to chime in on that as well. So Dr. Behar, please.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Ortiz. It is an honor to be here today. It is an honor for me to stand next to EK virtually during this time of our pandemic, but to stand by her side as colleagues, to work together towards making our university a stronger university and a better community, because I too was raised in this community, and I too am raising my family in this community. And collectively, we all want a better FIU and a better South Florida. And so my hope for today is that I can listen, carefully, and I can learn through those opening words that Dr. Ortiz mentioned of unity and action, and transform this passion into positive paths forward in designing actionable programs for our students, for our faculty, and for our staff. And to that end, in short order, I want to highlight an example to address Dr. Ortiz's question. Just yesterday, our Healthy Living program and BSU collaborated on a program called Wellbeing and Activism. And it is on Instagram TV. So it is recorded and you can access it. We can post the link out there for those that would like to see it. But our Healthy Living program is working actively to design programs that students are able to participate in, to partake in. Certainly our Counseling and Psychological Services Center, CAPS, has always worked with individual students when they encounter difficulties. And if any individual student is encountering a difficulty, they should reach out to our CAPS officers so that they may help them. But certainly CAPS is also designing group therapy and group counseling sessions to engage in this important time of dialogue. What we know is that dialogue and communication are key to our healing and to our improvement. So we are certainly open to ideas and suggestions, and students can go right on the website and suggest group counseling sessions. And we are going to be listening attentively and partaking and designing programs that we hope will move the university forward.
Thank you, Dr. Behar. I appreciate you. And let me just add, because I want this community to know, in addition to our CAPS resources for our students, we have a powerful, capable, professional team in our Office of Employee Assistance that will help us navigate these turbulent times. For me, I've been saying there are really two pandemics that we're living, right? And so we certainly have the pandemic that's associated with COVID, but we have this pandemic that's associated with racism, right? And so we need help. We need to talk about it. And that office is available to all of us, all of the faculty, all of the staff, to get the support that we need to navigate. They've been working overtime, and it is the pleasure of our team of professionals in our Office of Employee Assistance to be here in support of all of you as we navigate these times. Thank you, Dr. Ortiz and Dr. Behar.
Thank you, Vice President Hudson. So I'm going to turn, we talked a little bit about what's available to students, and I know we've been seeing more questions come in relative to that, but I think it's appropriate at this time to turn it over to our students, right, and hear from them. We have three outstanding student leaders that have joined us today, as I mentioned, Artrice Shepard, Alexandra Valdez, and Benny Williams. And a lot of the questions that we've received and a lot of the questions that we're seeing on the Q&A, talks about what else we can do. What are we missing? Is there anything that you're hearing from the student body that's out there that feels that maybe FIU has not necessarily considered or can do better, right? We all feel here, those of us on the call and those of us abroad that are listening, the students are the blood that flows through our veins, and we have to make sure that we're keeping in contact with what your needs are and what's best for our students. So let me start with Artrice, and maybe you could talk a little bit in terms of your perspective, the student perspective, in terms of what we can do better and how we can be better.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Ortiz, and everybody that's here. I think that the first thing a lot of students are feeling right now is wanting the faculty, staff, our professors that we come in contact with, people in departments that we are constantly in contact with, advisors, wanting them to understand, specifically from the Black community at FIU, that this is happening to our community. And right now, we need to be protected. Right now, we need to be defended. Right now, we need to feel cared for. And so I think having trainings for the faculty and staff that does not represent the Black community on how to better understand the Black community will help us as students to be able to understand and be able to empathize and just share with you what's going on so you understand why we feel the way that we do. Sometimes we see students start to act out in different ways that they never would have before when we're going through, as Ms. Hudson said, two pandemics, one that's viral and one that is racism. So when you have these things going on, students that are in the Black community feel attacked, feel, even if it's not happening to them personally, it's happening to us. And so if our professors, if our administrators can understand why we feel the way that we do and empathize with us as students will be more open and inclined to tell you what's wrong and how we can go forward fixing it.
Thank you, Artrice. Let me have Alexandra Valdez jump in now as well.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. Thank you, Dr. Ortiz. I just want to emphasize how FIU has so many resources that we offer to our students. And being a student leader, it's important that we emphasize those resources and not just market them once a year when things like this arise, but have a strategic, set of scheduled marketing for all of these resources. So students know that they're available to them at all times. FIU has an amazing multicultural program and services department that offers a lot of resources to our students, and having having the opportunity to market and emphasize all the workshops that they host to our students on topics of advocacy and highlighting things within our community is also an important way to educate our students on what's really happening behind the FIU community. I want to emphasize how CAPS is an amazing facility that FIU has. Counseling is always full.
Alexander, I think we lost you momentarily. So I'm gonna have you jump back in once you reconnect. So Benny Williams, would you like to step in for her here and give us some thoughts, and we'll get Alexandra back in when she's ready.
Yes, sir, thank you. I think for a lot of students, everything seems departmental, where when us as minorities or as cultural students, as a Black man, as a Black student here, everything was go to Empathize. Or when it comes to like, oh, if it's Black needs, or go talk to Empathize, or go talk to BSU. And I think there's much more resources, there's much more answers, there's much more conversation that we can be having with different organizations and different departments. And from there, it's just opening up, having, like back what our teacher was saying, trainings, having people trained so they know how to speak with us, knowing how we feel, knowing these things, because we don't want to just keep bringing up these situations and we keep having these conversations at a town hall once a year. You know what I'm saying? It shouldn't be like that. It should also be something that's ongoing, you know, all year round. And these like I said, these conversations should be held a little bit more. And that's just me going back with that. I know from the Greek perspective, our organizations, which is under the National Panhellenic Council, our organizations are rooted in this. You know what I'm saying? We've been doing things like this outside in the community. And sometimes when we try to bring it back to FIU, it's like the same 10 students, the same 15, the same 20 students are coming. And it's like, how are we not making this outreach bigger? How we've been doing this for the past 113 years and based on college campuses, and the conversation is still the same. Okay, so what's next? And I feel like that's something that we need to work for. And that's something that, you know, organizations and the departments need to know.
Thank you for that, Benny. You know, I'm hearing from all three students that, you know, it's great to have the training for faculty and staff, but there's also an element, right, in terms of supporting our students, training our students, giving them the opportunities to understand and become more accepting of the students that are around them. So I'm gonna put the provost on the spot as our chief academic officer in terms of some of the conversations that are taking place at the leadership level, and as well with our academic units, with our deans and with faculty, in terms of how we're looking at our curriculum, how we're looking at some of the work that we're getting ready to maybe consider to help create this culture of awareness here within FIU, not only just for the faculty and staff, but also to help students come together and build on that culture that we're trying to set for them.
Yeah, happy to do so. And as Mr. Williams has pointed out, you know, we can't keep having these conversations and things don't change. We need to move to action. And so some of the things that we're have implemented recently at the department level, we've asked every department to have a diversity, equity, and inclusion plan detailing how they intend to recruit more faculty from underrepresented populations. And we're setting very specific goals. So many people know me as the sort of the metrics man and the 20 metrics in the strategic plan. And one of the things we haven't done is really set specific metrics of what is the percentage of underrepresented faculty and staff that we want to have at the university over a period of time, and measure that and put in plans in place. And so these diversity plans go right down to the departmental level. And then at the faculty level, the faculty are participating in what's called a bystander leadership workshop. And so we've already had 400 of our faculty go through that workshop designed to reduce gender and race bias. And then we're also having what are called college equity advisors, which are faculty specifically trained to work at the college level to work with the deans, because of course the deans are the academic leaders of the colleges, and if they're not reinforcing it to the chairs and down to the faculty level, then it won't change. And so it really has to be a culture change, and you have to be persistent and have unrelenting desire to keep that change and actually measure the change. And so those are some of the things, like I mentioned, the initiative to hire more diversity mentor professors that can actually be there mentor other underrepresented professors to change that culture within the department level. So as Jörg Reinhold mentioned, we do have this, we're working to reduce implicit bias, which exists by having these workshops. They're called STRIDE workshops, which are based on best practices. And when I came in as provost, I required all the search committees to go through that workshop. And so we have a expert in the best practices in hiring to reduce implicit bias, actually do training for all of the search and screen committees. And so each one of these things, there's no silver bullet, but we have to, and I'm sure there's more things that we can do, but I can just tell you that we're committed to staying on top of it, setting specific goals to change what we're doing at the moment. We've had some successes, but we have a long way to go. And I believe that with a consistent effort and a constant conversation, as Benny said, throughout the year, not just this one town hall, we'll make the changes that need to be made.
Thank you for that, Mr. Provost. And I see that Alexandra joined us. I'm gonna get back to you, Alexandra, so you can finish your thoughts. But I do want to send a question over to our Vice President of Engagement, Saif Ashouf. And I think the President may also want to chime in on that. We're seeing a lot of comments on the Q&A and questions, and even in previous questions. There is a sense of urgency that our students are experiencing at this time. They feel that there is more that can be done. They feel that they themselves can do more if given the right opportunity, if guided in the right direction. There's a lot of things that right now are being floated around the country in terms of what to support and what not to support and what's important and what's not. So the question came out is what do we, or what can we, and in your office, in your role, obviously being the tip of the spear when it comes to engagement out in the community, what can we tell our students, and how can we sort of direct them to how they can get more involved and where they can turn to and how they can be part of this change? Because as we know, change requires commitment, it requires persistence, it requires connection, it requires a lot of things, right? But it starts with getting involved in the right place. So Mr. Ashouf, if you can start it off, and maybe the President, you'd also like to sort of in a broader perspective, talk about how our students can be more involved. Saif?
Thanks, Dr. Ortiz. I want to start off first by saying something that has to be said at the very beginning of this all, and that's Black Lives Matter. And so for everybody that's listening on, we see you, we hear you, we feel you. This is a moment where, for those of us, even if we're people of color that aren't Black, it's time for us to listen, to unlearn, to empathize, and to evolve, and take action, which is what today is all about. So I want to start off with that, because I think it absolutely matters. Like many of the folks that are here, my colleagues, my friends on this leadership team, I'm a kid from the 305. I believe in the best version of our community, but also as our VP of engagement for an institution that is community engaged, I believe at our heart, we actually can't build a bridge to the future unless we confront elements of our history, of our past, and the urgent present. We all know the name George Floyd, but how many of us know the name of William Simmons, Roy Gaines, J.B. Harris? These were young Black men that were murdered, lynched right here in Miami-Dade County in 1919, 1920. There's no monument, there's no memorial for them. So I want to start off by saying that it's a great question, Pablo, because the truth of the matter is, and Dr. Rosenberg talks about it, and he said it at the beginning, that at FIU, we're not asking for a lighter load. We're asking for broader shoulders. And so for all of our students that are looking on, that want to get engaged, that want to get involved, it's incumbent on all of us to embrace a common understanding of our history. How many of us know that Dr. King actually wrote the I Have a Dream speech at the historic Hampton House, right in Liberty City, right down the street from where E.K. Hudson grew up? How many of us know these pieces of our history? And so we've got activities. First and foremost, we have to lead with a sense of curiosity to understand what's happening around us. We have to think about how we building meaningful connections with communities of color all throughout South Florida. We've held since the beginning of this pandemic, and I'm not going to go through the laundry list, Pablo, because that doesn't really help us get to where we're going. We've held about 80 different online community conversations since the pandemic started, and we're going to do a lot more. We're going to continue to hold these types of discussions. We had a community violence panel last week. We had a conversation with one of our prominent alums, Kanasha Paul, and we're going to continue to have these types of discussions. So I would say for students that are interested, we are here, the Office of Engagement. The partnerships that we're building are about tackling and building inroads of equity and opportunity, whether that's through enhancing paid internship opportunities and working with a range of different businesses, whether or not that's speaking truth to power with institutions in our local community and saying, how can panels better reflect the diversity and equity of the lived experiences of our residents that are here? And then finally, I think it's important, and President Rosenberg talks about this all the time, and it's all throughout, and it's embedded in the history of who we are as an institution. We have to understand and truly begin to process the elements of Miami's story. The ghost of Jim Crow has not actually gone away. And unless we're actually willing to engage in partnerships like what we do every single year, we have a community breakfast in the Little Haiti community, the Dr. Maya Angelou Community Breakfast, where we take a time to pause and reflect on the words of Dr. Angelou and on the message and the importance of deep and meaningful contact. It's not just words, it's also about building relationships with vendors, partners, and building and supporting community-based organizations and making sure that our students are plugged in. So we've got a range of those activities that are ongoing. Our partnerships start with the idea that we need to understand the context of the world around us beyond 107th. We need to establish the relevance of what our scholars and students, faculty, and professional staff are doing. And ultimately, we need to blend that context and relevance and drive actual measured impact. And we're really committed to that. I want to make sure everybody knows that we're here as VP of Engagement. Reach out to me, reach out to my team. I'm going to put my cell phone number in the chat. It's 786-246-8434. Hit me up on Instagram, DM me, wherever you want to reach. I'm your VP of Engagement, not disengagement. And let's actually have a meaningful conversation about partnerships that we want to build that are creating the type of impact so that those names that I mentioned, Roy Gaines, J.B. Harris, William Simmons, that died 97 years ago, that are not forgotten. Just like we guarantee that we're not going to forget the names of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Eric Garner, Philando Castile, Trayvon Martin, and countless others, young Black people that have been senselessly murdered. We're committed through our partnership to embracing our past as we build partnerships for the future.
Thank you, Saif. Mr. President, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, first of all, I agree with Saif. There's a lot more there that we have to get vigorously involved in. I see this, first of all, most of us are here because we believe in our students. I've had the privilege of working with our students for about, 44 years now, and what's to me the most amazing quality of our students is their determination to succeed against all odds. And I'd like to see if you will, an army of students who are willing to educate us about the things that we should know and how we can get better. Most people don't know that we actually have already an army of students who are involved in peer learning, particularly in the STEM areas. And so why can't we have an army of students who are willing to be educators, that education process is not just a formal process, but an informal process. So I'd like to see at the grassroots level, us learning more aggressively from our students. The second element that the provost mentioned, that has been mentioned, so that's more of a grassroots, bottom up. I'd like to see as well, and this is what we're going to start, is a much more aggressive grow your own capability. We have incredible African-American students who and other minority students who have the full potential to be leaders in academia and in public affairs, but they may not have thought about it, or they may not feel that they're qualified. We can grow our own. And I'd like to see us do a better job of growing our own, whether it's professional staff at FIU, to become professional staff at FIU, to become faculty at FIU, to become community leaders. And so we are going to start that. And in many ways, that's why some of that begins directly with, on one hand, but not exclusively, of an expanded bridge program. On another, a much more aggressive set of relationships with a lot of our incredible high schools in the 305, so that students there understand that we want them at FIU and we're willing to work with them where they are, so that they can become the leaders of tomorrow. Because if we don't do that, who will? Who will? It's got to be us.
So Mr. President, I'm gonna follow up on a question, or a series of questions that were asked in relation to what you just commented and some of the initiatives that we're putting in place. And in fact, one of the questions said that in the President's presentation, you listed a lot of important and admirable goals, a lot of action steps, but we're now in a climate where I think our students and all of our participants are recognizing that the economy is taking a hit. Funding might be of a concern. So the question that was lodged is, well, how, as the president, how do you intend on making all of this happen? And how would the FIU community know of what has happened and what has been done so that they are kept informed of our progress?
Well, I mean, clearly we're accountable, and I haven't put anything on this list that I didn't think we couldn't do. I've already been lucky. I've already raised $1 million today from a donor, a member of our board, who has said that that individual will step up. Now, I got to be candid. I made 4 asks. I have a 25% hit rate so far, but I'm very optimistic. That's 1. 2, I think the provost said it very well. The provost is now proposing a more aggressive system of measurement, and I think we all would support that. And those numbers are very, we're very accountable in that. Thirdly, I don't know, I've been around for a while. I've managed budgets for a while. I've talked to a lot of people in the last 3 days. I think everything on that list is doable. I think the resources, we can find them. It's the will to not just do it, but the will to sustain the initiatives across time. That's why I spoke in my message the other day about permanent victories. I want some permanent victories. I have a sense of impatience here with this issue that goes back to my childhood, where my father, who was a veteran of World War II, was always frustrated that he, in fact, was assigned in his military assignment to be in charge of a segregated battalion. And so what an irony, to fight World War II, to liberate millions of people on one hand, but then to have to do that under the yoke of racial discrimination. And so I think a number of us, have a sense that we have an obligation to get on this and to get on with it. And I ask individuals at our university and in our community to join in that. And I think that's what we're seeing. And so I'm optimistic that what we set our mind to, we can do. We can turn the impossible into the inevitable here in our system. I'm very optimistic about that, very positive. And I know the resources are always, when have resources not been an issue? Excuse me, when have resources not been an issue? And look what we've done in less than 50 years. We built this institution, and we've built something that's very, very powerful. We got the mojo, we can do this.
Love it, thank you, Mr. President. So I'm getting a bit nervous. I'm sure everybody's getting it. I get little flashes that my internet connection is unstable, and I think that's because we have now surpassed 950 participants. on today's town hall. So we're all sort of flooding the internet here and listening in on this conversation. And just so everyone is aware, if we don't get to your question, if we don't answer your specific question, as I mentioned, we will be posting the answers to those questions and making that available for everyone to see. We want to make sure that no question goes unanswered. We're trying to go through these as much as we can. So Alexandra, you started sharing some comments earlier, and I think you've been in your post as the new SGA president for a very short amount of time. Nothing like a little baptism by fire, right? But so talk to us about your role, about what you're seeing, what you're hearing from the students, and what FIU, as to President Rosenberg's comments, what we can do to be better and to better support you.
Absolutely, thank you. So I just wanted to echo President Rosenberg's statement. You know, we're here to have that permanent victory and really be there for our students to find out what it is that they want from us, and essentially engage with them, provide them with a platform to speak out and to be an advocate. And that's something that I'm very excited to work with all of you in this coming year as your SGA president, and really making an impact at FIU. Something that we're super passionate about is, again, being that voice for students and putting that platform for them to speak out and being vocal, and just participating with all our amazing student organizations and student groups to facilitate that as well.
Thank you very much, Alexandra, and I'm glad we finally heard your message and you got all the way through it. So I'm gonna change the channels a little bit here, because we've seen a lot of questions on these topics, and we haven't really talked too much about it yet. And it's been mentioned. And Sherlon, I know that you've been waiting patiently to interject. A lot of conversation and questions regarding opportunities, equity, our hiring practice, how we ensure that we have diversity in our workforce, what kinds of opportunities there are for our employees, whether faculty or staff, in particular for our Black employees, on the upward mobility that is available to them at FIU. And it even also involves some of the questions for the police chief, right, for Chief Casas, in terms of, you know, what they're doing to ensure that there is a more diverse workforce in the police department. So Sherlon serves as the coordinator for for Title IX and Human Resources. And Sherlon, maybe you could talk a little bit about the efforts the university undertakes in terms of its diversity training, and the opportunities in our hiring practices as an institution.
Yes. I am Sherlon McWhorter. Thank you so much, Dr. Ortiz. I am, as he stated, the Title IX coordinator, but also I am the director of the Office of Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Access, which certainly is an integral part of what we do here at FIU. One of the things that I believe is that an organization is only as good as its culture. When we talk about the issues that we're here discussing today, which I certainly am excited and delighted to be on this panel along with all of the people that are here. The good thing about this panel is we are, what we say in my neighborhood, we're singing to the choir, right? Because we are people here who believe in the ideas of justice, inclusion, equity, and those kinds of things. But as I talk to students and as I've looked into the faces of some of the students as we've been doing these Zooms, I see the hurt, I see the pain, the despair. And I really appreciate the comments, Dr. Asuf, that you've made regarding where we are and where we're going. And, you know, while everything that we said is very, very important, one of the things before I go into, you know, certainly answering your question, is that what I would like to see, and we talked some about it, but these conversations where we're bringing people, not like-minded people, but people who have different, what we would call different-minded people from different backgrounds with different ideas of how what this looks like. People who don't necessarily agree with what you and I may agree with, and bring those people together here at FIU. I had the opportunity to speak to a student recently who said to me, he was from California, Black male. I asked him, how did he get to FIU? He said, it's the middle name. And I gave that some thought. I'm like, what does he mean? He said, international. We are, to the world, Florida International University. And if we're going to live up to our name, we have to make sure that we are inclusive, that we have the diversity that we say that we want. Here at FIU, when we're talking about search and screens, when we're hiring faculty, we're hiring staff, we're looking at ways, and we've been doing this, you know, forever. This is not something new, but we're looking at ways of bringing on diverse groups of people. It is a fact that students do better. There's research that shows that students do better in class when they're able to see themselves as faculty members. And so are we working harder? Do we appreciate the comments that our provost has made today and the efforts? It's music to my ear that we've come up with some new initiatives and some new programs that will help to bring on more diverse groups of our people, specifically for our Black students, to be able to see themselves in the classroom when they walk there. But it makes a difference. You say, how could that make a difference? Emotionally, mentally, physically, it matters. And so for us to work harder, to make sure that we're being smarter and making sure that we maintain the students who are Black students here at FIU, maintain them so that they're not going out to other universities. We're having programs that will keep them here. Also, that we're encouraging, I think somebody said it earlier, encouraging our students to go into teaching, to get their PhDs, so that they too will understand that you can do it. How do I know that I can do it? I need to see somebody who looked like me doing it. And that, for some people, that may not seem, that's what it takes. It makes a difference. I need to see myself doing it. And that says to me that I too can do it. And so bringing in more professors who look like our students is, I think, very, very important. And Mr. Provost, I appreciate your comments and the things that you're putting together to make sure that that happens. We have search and screen committees. On those committees, we're working even harder than ever to make sure that there are diverse groups of people on those committees. If you're going to bring people of color to FIU, people no longer want to be the first at a university. People don't want to be the first Black on this committee, at this university. That day is long past. That's not a badge of honor. And so what we're looking to do is make sure that these committees are diverse, even if we have to bring in students to serve on these committees. And we've done that before, and we welcome that opportunity because it's much needed. It makes a difference. The question for me is, how do we get people to engage that may not necessarily agree or believe in the things that we're talking about? There are students that come, and these students are with their hearts broken. They came here with a lot of energy, and when I see them leave, a lot of that's gone. A lot of that's gone for whatever reason, and we need to figure out, and we need to have maybe, I don't know, and I know that we're a state university and there are certain things that we can and cannot do. One of the things I'd like to see is maybe a certification, not only a certification for our students in D&I, diversity and inclusion. If there was some way to have at an international university where before you leave here, you needed to take a diversity course. We have people here at FIU I was talking to, names have been changed to protect the innocent because I didn't get permission. I went to a person here at FIU in a very high position who I never knew. He's been here for a minute. Talking to him, he did his dissertation on the exact subject that we're talking about right now. Let's figure out who those people are. Who are the allies at FIU? We have a lot of them, but we don't know that. Our students don't know that. We need to recognize them. We need to make it known so that the students will know there are students, there are faculty members, there are staff here who agree with you, who are working for you. A lot of them are working and you don't know that. They need to know, I think. I think that's really important. And so as we continue to fight the good fight, to do all that we can do to make FIU the wonderful institution that it is, I want to encourage the students to reach out to us, not just in forums like this, but at all times, whatever your issues are. Yeah, you know, a lot of them are holding a lot of things in. And we've gotten some additional staff, Elizabeth, over at CAPS, and I'm really happy and excited about that. They've already had meetings. CAPS has already had a meeting regarding this issue, regarding what they can do for our Black students to make that feel more welcome for them. Believe it or not, we know that Black students are not comfortable. It's part of our background, it's where we're from. We're not comfortable going to talk to psychiatrists and psychologists, although we need it more than ever. But we want to encourage our students to take advantage of these programs. And believe me, they are working on it. I had some conversations with them this morning on things that they're doing to make it a more of a welcome place and make our students feel that they're there for them as well. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Shalon. And I think that, you know, your response is very powerful in the sense that you talk about the systemic change, the cultural change that your office is undertaking at this point to help create that diversity and that awareness across all of the departments and across the entire institution, but really specifically as it relates to the students. The connection to the students' ability to see themselves in the interactions that they have at the university. So I'm going to turn that now to both Benny Williams and Artrice Shepard, because some of the questions that we've had come up on the Q&A talk specifically to that, right? Like one of the questions asked, you know, particularly with the Black Student Union, is what kinds of conversations are taking place at the Black Student Union? What are the classmates saying in terms of what the desired changes are? We talk about the importance of having that connection or seeing yourself in the folks that you interact with at the university, but we know change like that, it can take some time, right? It can take years to really create and solidify that cultural change that we're working so hard to establish. But what are you seeing as students in terms of what better opportunities we can provide, what things can be done? We saw one comment on the Q&A of a student that said that they went to CAPS and they felt that their experience wasn't a very positive one. Actually, that the staff member did not make them feel like they were very welcome. And I know that Dr. Behar may want to jump in on that as well. But as students, what are you hearing? What are things really down in the trenches that we are missing and to help build that awareness, that connection that we are also desperately seeking?
So I think that the first thing is having, you know, our CAPS department and having just our faculty and staff that do not represent the Black community at FIU be culturally competent with dealing with Black students. And the reason I say that is because there are certain issues, there are certain obstacles that just naturally we experience on a day-to-day basis that the non-Black community would not experience. And so when we have to go into spaces like CAPS and we might not feel comfortable with really sharing what is really causing our anxiety or what's really causing our depression and all of these other things to happen to us, it's because we don't feel comfortable that the person sitting on the other side is not culturally competent or does not understand why I feel the way that I do as a student. Furthermore, BSU wants to have this open transparency dialogue with faculty, staff, and administration. So my job as BSU president, we are going to be rolling out an initiative, the People's Platform, where as student leaders, part of our job is to bring the concerns of students directly to administration, but we don't want to be the middleman. There are certain experiences that other Black students that are at FIU's campus that I have not experienced. So I want them to be able to show why this experience has changed the way they might look at FIU, which I don't want it to. I want every student that attends FIU to have a good experience. And so they have to share their experiences that may not have been so good or that may have caused a downfall in why they feel the way that they do. So the People's Platform is for student leaders to no longer be the middleman, for students to ask directly what their concerns and their questions are to administration. And hopefully from there, that conversation can start to enact a change and we can see actual policies in place. We can see change on our campus for our students, for our faculty and staff, and for everybody at our FIU community.
Thank you for that, Artrice. And I know that the president mentioned that we have to be held accountable, right? And part of that is ensuring that we are actually carrying out what we commit to carrying out, and we're communicating that. Benny, would you like to add anything to that?
I think she explained that well. And so, yeah, I'll leave that where that is.
So just to jump a little bit more into this, and Mr. Provost, this question was directed to you in terms of diversity. And I know that Shalon just provided a great detail in some of the work that we're doing, but diversity specific to undergraduate, graduate, postdoctoral opportunities for our students How are those conversations taking place? Are there initiatives that are being considered at this point to take a look at the diversity that we have within those opportunities at the student level that you can share at this point, or anything that you're working on with our faculty and our administrators?
Yeah, I'm happy to respond, and the president or others may want to weigh in as well. But I can tell you that one of the things in our new strategic plan is to be widely recognized as a top 50 public university. And one of the challenges is that most universities, when they aspire to move up in rankings, such as US News and World Report, they do it at the expense of low-income students or students of color. And so you typically will see, we're very proud that we're top 50 in the United States in upward social mobility. And our plan is to continue to rise in reputation, but maintain that access, including the most vulnerable of our population. And in this case, actually, Black males are historically have the lowest graduation rate because of the challenges that many of them have when they come in. And so we're very much aware of this, and we look at everything that we're doing to try to ensure that we maintain the diversity of our student population, and to develop programs such as our Golden Promise program, providing a full tuition and fees to students who come in who are full Pell eligible, and then also mentorship programs, particularly for populations that really need to see people who are like them and see that they can succeed. But like I said, we haven't done enough. We need to expand these programs, and I'm very happy to have further discussions on what we can do to expand the knowledge, both for especially staff, advisors, the people that the students interact with on a regular basis need to have that cultural competency. And actually, one of the things I do want to say to follow up on Vice President Ashuf's statement is that Black lives matter, and we need to say that. And many of us, amongst family and friends, when you state that, sometimes you'll hear back, all lives matter, which is really not. It misses the point. You can't end systematic racism unless you change the system. And so some of the things we're talking about in terms of programs is to change the system, but you have to change the culture. And that culture is that all lives can't matter until Black lives matter. And we have to keep with that message, and it has to be very well understood. Everyone at FIU needs to understand that, that it's not about them unless they're Black, and that if they haven't experienced this situation, the plight, as I think Vice President Ashuf very eloquently stated, in terms of just the history in the last 100 years here in Miami, much less the history in America and around the world, of what has happened to our our most vulnerable in our community. And so I think that's going to be a big part of how do we roll out those kind of communication campaigns. It's, we exist to educate, right? And it's not just about educating undergrads, it's about educating all of us. And so there are people who are just ignorant to these, these events that happened a long time ago, and they have to be reminded, and we have to figure out a way to ensure that, so that when all of us are interacting, we understand from the perspective of those that are in the most vulnerable situation. It came out in the recent event. I think it was most striking, and I've heard it before in terms of, and I actually used this with a family member when they were not understanding all about Black Lives Matter, and it's the burning house analogy, where if you go into a neighborhood and there's a house on fire, the firefighters have to deal with that house. It doesn't mean that all houses don't matter, but right now that house matters more because that's the house on fire. And that's why Black lives matter, because that's the situation that we need to deal with right now. We need to end the systemic racism by changing the system and figuring out how to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Provost. So here's a question for the president, but I would like Dr. Behar to chime in on this as well. And going back to Benny's point, right? You know, these can't be one-off conversations that we have once a year or once every other year, or in particular how this one student put it, that, you know, these student concerns are addressed on a continuing basis and not when there's a crisis, right? How do we as a university, Mr. President, ensure that these are going to be ongoing conversations, and we have in our FIU a culture where students are going to feel heard and they're going to feel supported? And the second part to that for Dr. Behar, as you've heard with the CAPS, the one student who had that experience that wasn't so positive, how do we keep our finger on the pulse as a university, as leadership in the university, to ensure that these conversations are not a reaction, but are creating a proactive approach to what we're trying to accomplish as a university? Mr. President.
Yeah, I think part of it starts with leadership. I think the leadership has to be convinced that these are important goals, and the notion that Black Lives Matter has to become embedded in the mindset of the leadership. I think mindset's critical. Sherlon mentioned the issue of organizational culture. Organizational culture has to change. And there has to be will to change that organizational culture. Toward what and around what is the critical question. And I feel that discussions such as this help us to answer that question and to give it shape and give it form. The reason that I decided to work with a few others and put down these issues of change, of action, is because as I said, I have an impatience for this on one hand, but I wanted to demonstrate that there are things that can happen, that we can do to begin to make those changes now, not to discuss it for the next, again, 20 years. But I believe it starts with leadership. There's no question in my mind about that. Having the courage to set quantifiable goals and to measure those, but also to be more human-centered and to understand that in the final analysis, we are here for other people. It's not about the buildings. Truthfully, it's not about the toys. It's about the feelings, the emotions, the capabilities, the hope, the opportunity that we engender. And so, you know, there's nothing that could be more important at this point than ensuring that our African-American community feels the hope, has the opportunity, and the fear is dissipated around what the future is going to bring. And we have a role in that, and I'm willing to say that, and I'm willing to step up and help to take responsibility for that, along with a lot of other people who I know are listening here today.
Dr. Behar?
Yeah, and I'd like to thank you, Pablo. I'd like to add to that because in addition to the panelists that are here, I think the president touched on an important element. There are a lot of people. My email, my phone has been going off the hook over these last few weeks. There is so much will amongst the entire university community. People saying, what can I do? How can we help? What can be done, right? So when the president talks about the finances and funding, right, the will is there. The will of our university community is so special, and people are so dedicated to that premise that we have to change, right? This is not about more of the same or incremental. We actually, if we are going to make an impact, if we are going to improve, if we really believe that Black Lives Matter, then we need to change what we're doing. Because what we have been doing is not working, and that is evident every single day for the last few days across our community and across our nation. And so I think that's really important. And you know, Pablo, I was struck by the comment and the feeds. You know, I haven't been able to see all the questions, but none of us want any negative experience at FIU. We've prided ourselves on improving our student experience, improving the human interaction. So I take it very seriously when students, when faculty, when staff don't have positive interactions, and we have to learn from them. And I think what I did see in the feed was the advice and the guidance I can give is bring it forward. And I think Artrice mentioned that there's some discomfort level of coming forward. but we need our faculty to come forward. To the Office of IDEA, of Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Access is a resource that was on the feed. People do need to come forward, not only with problems, but with solutions, because when you bring problems forward, you bring also the opportunity to really galvanize around innovative solutions. And so that's really what we need to do. I love the concept of cultural competence. We've worked on that from a pedagogical perspective in the academy, and just breaking the, if you will, more traditional generational gap between faculty and students. And that is why we do have an army, as the president mentioned, of learning assistants, the largest in the country. And I think we can use that model if we want to talk about change and provide a cadre of students who are focused on the competency of what's required to really build a culture of social justice around our community. And I've had faculty reach out and say, I'm happy to serve as a faculty fellow. I'm happy to engage deeper. Part of the premise of academic and student affairs was actually to change the mindset and to, if you will, break down the wall between what happens in the classroom and what happens extracurricularly, but on our campus, and on our campus as a bridge to the larger society. And so every day, deeper and deeper, when faculty want to get more involved with the Caribbean Studies Union, with the Black Student Union, even with our UPE organization, right? And really engage so that we can open that door, if you will, so that our students, our faculty, and our staff have a unified community. As you opened with unity, I think that is an important cornerstone of what we will be doing.
So Elizabeth, I'm gonna stay with you a moment because you've mentioned these resources that are available and the commitment that you have, and of course FIU has, to support our students and faculty, and just, you know, my own interpretation and what I'm sensing as you read through the feed and the questions that are being asked, there's a tremendous amount of hurt that is being experienced at this moment, right? Not just from students, but also from faculty and staff. Students who feel disconnected, faculty who feel disconnected, unsure of where to go. And one student actually asked a great question. I mean, what have we done to increase, for example, the mental health professionals that are available to work with our students? What's available to the faculty as well? Even in terms of the student health clinic. We talked about diversity, and Shalon talked a great deal about our efforts on diversity, but we also talked, right, and we highlighted, you know, Artrice highlighted, and so did Benny, the need to be able to really connect and see ourselves in the people that we're interacting with. What are some of the things that FIU has done and that are being done to increase the accessibility and the resources that are available and help bridge that divide that many are feeling and are expressing through the question and answers?
Absolutely, and it goes back a little bit to what both the president and the provost touched upon, which that which gets done is that which gets measured, right? And so we did have, through a statewide organization, a metric established to actually increase the student mental health counseling ratio to students, right? The mental health counseling ratio to students. And we've been working on that, and that has been a strategic priority. And amidst this financial uncertainty, those commitments are still there. So over the last year, we have hired approximately 7 mental health counselors. But it's not just about hiring, it's about the right kind of hiring. And certainly we work with the IDEA office and HR to ensure that they're diversity officers, but it's also about diversity hires, but also about the importance of hiring mental health counselors who specialize in the student population that we have, and in the age group that we have, and in the specific challenges that our students have from transitioning from K-12, from working, earning, and learning, right, into a university community, and then transitioning out. We talk about a number of our students as being first-generation students, and that's a conversation and a dialogue that is so critical, but it's only really talked about at the admissions level. And really what we have to understand is that for every first-generation student who graduates, it's a first-generation student who's entering the professional world, who's beginning to establish a network of his or her own college and professionally guided career colleagues. And so some of the conversations that we have, even with our junior faculty, is they're bridging that gap. They're beginning to engage in those conversations. So it's critically important that we prioritize, right? And it's not about more money. Certainly more money is ideal. And the president mentioned that he was, only 1 for 4 for $1 million today, but actually I see that as a positive. Nobody required him to go out and make calls and ask for money today. He sees how important it is. And so it's a priority. So it's a priority for all of us as divisional vice presidents to go in and look at the funding and the programming that we have and reprioritize, right? And pivot. It's what we do. And that's actually at the crux of mindset is you don't throw away the mind that you have, you pivot it. Right? You open it, you broaden it, and you expand and you learn. And so we're going to do that as divisional vice presidents. We're going to see what we have and how we can utilize it to achieve the aims that we need to for our community.
Thank you, Dr. Behar. I'm gonna get the students here back involved because as the president mentioned at the very beginning of this town hall, we really are here to listen and hear from you. And you've heard a lot from our vice presidents and the panel that we have in terms of things that are in place or things that we're working on and things that we know that we need to do and want to do. And you just heard, for example, Dr. Behar talk about, right, pivoting that mindset and how we can change that. How do you see the students getting more involved in that kind of change? What is it that we can do to help open the doors more for dialogue? Saif Ashuf talked about the engagement in the community and connecting out in the community and having that presence, but understanding that with so much in front of us now and so much happening, it could at times be overwhelming to even know where to begin. What do you see is needed, and where do you see we can help, as I mentioned, opening up those opportunities for students to get more involved in terms of helping us change the culture and shift the culture that we want to change?
So I think that, once again, it starts with the conversation, but then just including students on the actions that are going to be taking place. So I understand that administrators are there to essentially decide on what happens with our education. And if you include students on that conversation, you'll get more transparency from students about what they want, what they expect. And then you'll also understand what and how you can expect students to respond to the decisions that you all make in terms of how that affects us as students that live on campus, that drive back and forth to campus, that may have jobs with working with FIU, but they're still a student first as well. So having students in those conversations on the changes that will be made in terms of how this affects our education and how this affects our lives as students at FIU, you will be able to start to see the changes, and you'll be able to see the transparency from students, like I said, and just more comfortability with us as students, with our administrators that are, taking the lead and making sure that students feel safe when coming to FIU, students feel comfortable at FIU, students feel like they can really thrive and lean onto our motto of being worlds ahead as students.
Thank you, Arturo. Alexandra, as the SGA president, we know that you are very involved, right? And you will be part of a lot of very important conversation, even serving as one of our trustees at the university. But how do you see in your role, how the university or the university leadership can help you get students more involved and at the table when it comes to these very important conversations?
I think it's important to highlight how education is essential in this, making sure that we show how FIU continues to move the needle in educating our students, providing them with, for example, the micro-credentials and badging is an important resource that FIU has, and it's, pivoting that mindset of higher education. And I think that having that conversation of different courses, diverse courses that we can offer students in the micro-credentialing department is definitely a way to have that conversation, seeing what students want from us and how we can help them in that aspect.
Thank you. Benny, you look like you're leaning in, ready to share something with us.
Yeah, it's definitely building that relationship with students. Once you allow us to make our foot in and put our foot in inside these policy decisions and just anything that goes forward with the university. Once you make us feel like we have a voice, then you can start to see the change. A lot of times it's like we feel like we're saying things and then nothing really happens, and it's going back to like these conversations that need to just continually happen. Once you put us in a room or once you put us there, that we have this platform, because this is what the university is about, giving us this platform. And, you know, administrators will have this relationship with us. And from there, then you can see how students and administrators are bouncing ideas off of each other. And once you get these ideas going, then you have a change. Then you're moving towards something that's going to really make a difference. And that's what I was going back on today, just making sure that you build your relationship with these students. And when I'm a former student, so I'm not here right now, but make sure that people who are in the next generation of FIU, they have a place to speak and they have a platform. So when they leave and they graduate, they know exactly what they're doing in this world, because it doesn't just stop here at FIU. It starts in other universities. It starts in other places across the country and other places across the world. So when you come into the school, then you feel like you can make a change here. Then anything that you do is limitless. You know what I'm saying? You can make so much more change, and just going from there. You know, understanding that's what that is. It's understanding that the students are the ones who have the power to make the change. And yeah.
So Benny, you may be a former student, but you're always a Panther, and I agree. We need to continue to have these kinds of opportunities for you to be able to express your thoughts and opinions and weigh in on some of the decisions that are being made. So now it was mentioned, so I'm now gonna put the president, the provost, and Elizabeth Behar on the spot here to talk a little bit about, you know, some of the future that we're seeing in higher education. We heard already now the badging, the micro-credentials, right? And I know, Mr. President, you have been at the forefront of talking about how we as a university can evolve to help our students get better prepared for the future, right? Beyond the degree, but really just-in-time type of learning and those experiences. And I think that soon everybody will see that FIU is leading the country in this effort with what we're trying to do. So maybe President Rosenberg, you want to sort of set the table for that, and then the provost and Dr. Behar can chime in as well.
Okay, thank you. Just very quickly, the economy is changing very rapidly. We know that. The labor force, there are different requirements now for labor force for employment. In the old days, if you got an education, a 4-year education or a 5-year education or a 6-year education, that was for a lifetime. Truth of the matter is probably 30 to 40% of the employment in 5 to 8 years, we don't even know what that job actually looks like. And so therefore we have to be far more agile and far more responsive to changes in the marketplace. Can we do that with traditional degrees? Take 4 years, 5 years, 6 years. Can we do that on a semester by semester basis? Can we be, to Artrice's point, meeting students where they're at, meeting learners where they're at? Can we be more agile there so that each learner has programs that are tailored for their needs and where they're going? There's a lot of questions here. And I'm very happy to tell you that our new strategic plan that the provost has put together with a group of faculty and with students and other frankly sets us up pretty well. And I would like to ask the provost to speak to that very quickly, and then Dr. Behar, because it not only enables us to be student-centered, but it enables us to be far more responsive to our entire community and be learner-centered. So Provost and Dr. Behar, please.
Yes, Mr. President. Yeah, so our new strategic plan, the Next Horizon 2025 plan, sets very ambitious goals of a 60% 4-year graduation rate and 70% 6-year graduation rate for our students. And it does it not by changing, as I said, the demographics of our students. It's about changing, in some cases, mindsets of faculty and in many cases changing the system in which we operate. So for example, we have a much more robust summer, and we're going to keep growing the summer. So this summer we have over 1,000 students more than we had last summer. The idea being that if students think about the university as a 12-month university, they can complete their studies more quickly. And it's not about just rankings and, there are metrics within the state, but it's around the sooner students can complete their undergraduate degree and get into the workforce or come back and work on the graduate program, the faster they graduate, the more money they save and the more money they earn in their lifetime. And so it's actually the students who come in that are don't have to work and maybe have support of their family tend to graduate more quickly, and it gives them an advantage. So it just perpetuates the challenge of students who are coming in where they have to support their family, or they're coming in less prepared. And so we have a whole number. We have 20 metrics, which we had 20 metrics in the last strategic plan, but now they've been modified. One of them is to be top 50, not only in upward economic mobility, which is focusing on continuing to provide at least 50% of our students to be full Pell eligible students, and ensure that those students actually graduate not with a zero gap, but with increasing to the point that those students actually graduate at a higher rate than the non-Pell students. And Elizabeth actually, is leading efforts in that regard that maybe she can share with you. But one thing I wanted to say, in the interest of time, I won't go through all the different initiatives, but I do encourage you to look at the Next Horizon 2025 plan. But there are things, such as the SAT and the ACT scores, which over years, we've known that these standardized tests, can be discriminatory to certain populations. And the NAACP had done a report more than 10 years ago explaining that standardized test scores, disadvantage populations. And so, but it's almost 8% of the rankings of universities. And empirically, there's been many, many studies to show that those standardized test scores are not an indication of the quality of the institution or the quality of the individual. And so it's going to be interesting to see, I believe, since the SAT scores, this SAT is not going to be available, there may be a suspension of using the SAT, or at least limiting its use, which I think is actually, a positive, one of the few, positives coming out of this COVID-19 pandemic. But I would like to see that change, so that U.S. News eliminates that as one of their metrics, because that's an indication of an area that disadvantages individuals who are already coming from perhaps disadvantaged backgrounds, or for other reasons they don't score well on standardized tests. And we know that is not an indication of success. So that I just point that out, as we need to take advantage of opportunities that can provide a way to level the playing field for all individuals going to higher education, including our Panthers. And I think, so that's an area where we're admitting students, as the president talks about pathways. We have multiple different pathways for students to come in to FIU in order to graduate in a timely fashion. And we focus on the GPA within their major and directing them into the right major. And then we have a variety of different programs that we've already implemented and we will continue to implement. So we're already approaching the 50% four-year graduation rate, when it wasn't that long ago that we were below 25%. So we'll have doubled the graduation rate for our students. And I said that results in them, saving money for themselves and for perhaps their family, having less debt when they graduate, getting into the market sooner, or getting into graduate studies. So in their lifetime, they'll earn much more money through some of these initiatives. And I can tell you, Senior Vice President Behar can share a little bit about this. We're getting a lot of recognitions from a number of foundations and national outlets for these initiatives, because people are just really surprised at how remarkable we're doing. And I feel a little guilty sometimes when if I get any credit for it, because it's really the remarkable students and giving us information on what we can do to help them be successful. So I'll turn it over to Elizabeth.
Thank you, Mr. Provost. Yeah, I think if there's one thing that I can say to describe our collective leadership at the university is that we're obsessive about not being satisfied. So we are being recognized. We do know that we can make progress, that our students, pound for pound, I'll put our Panthers against any students across the country, and they're stellar. And so we continue to fight for that. And we do it within the academy through small programs like our SSS, our TRIO programs, our AGEP grant that was mentioned earlier, our Golden Drums, our Golden Scholars. And we know those are small programs and impacting a few hundred students at a time. But when we take them to scale, we can certainly make collective impact. And that's what we're trying to do. And that's what we're trying to achieve. So I really am thrilled that when we all put our heads on the pillow, we're never satisfied. We're always wanting not just to check a box, we're actually wanting to make impact. And that's what we continue to strive to do. With respect to micro-credentialing, it actually transpired somewhat similarly, Pablo, to get to your original question, which is recognizing that just because we graduate a student, they walk across the stage, when we had face-to-face, but we had a fabulous virtual commencement as well this spring, but that our job isn't done. And that in fact, technology, the world, knowledge, the knowledge value revolution, right? All of those things are impacting our students. And that just because you've completed a degree, 16 months later, we had a responsibility to make sure that that degree included elements where as a learner, not as a student, right, but as a learner, that you could continue to grow and to learn. And the micro-credentialing initiatives stem from there, which is what are some small skills-based, just-in-time learning opportunities that we could provide to students, to graduates. The first pilot was actually with faculty with an assessment badge, right, that we could focus on really providing an opportunity for our university community. We could continue to strive with our university community that will be hyper competitive. So I don't want our students to just graduate with, just graduate with a degree. I want them to graduate with a degree and with the skill sets and the ability to advocate for themselves about, why hire me over somebody else? And we have those opportunities and we have those skills that are embedded both from a technological side to make sure that we have the state of the art for our students, and we recognize, right, that the universe of the academy is changing. And I say that very slowly and very intentionally because if we understand higher ed, as I do believe that our president does, he recognized it, believed in higher ed, but also knows that our academy is a little bit slower to change. And we needed to accelerate so that we could not just keep pace with technology and the world and global issues around us, but so that we could actually be the pace car. We could set the pace. And that's what we want our Panthers to be able to do when they go out in the world. So we're really excited about the micro-credentialing opportunity, both from the perspective of providing our graduates opportunities to re-engage as learners whenever they need to reskill, upskill, retool, but also for our students. And so for our continuing students and ongoing students to be able to progress and get the degree, but also make sure that they have that 21st century skill set that is going to be needed now more than ever.
Thank you for that, Elizabeth, and actually a perfect segue because I wanted to bring in Vice President Ishouf, talking about lifelong learners and opportunities that we want to continue to offer our own community members and those that are in need of ongoing training and opportunities. Saif has spearheaded a wonderful opportunity called Up Labs, and maybe Saif, you could spend just a minute or two just talking about what that is, very successful, and what we're doing with that program.
Thanks, Pablo. Dr. Rosenberg oftentimes talks about this idea that in the future, we might not all be students, but we have to become learners. And so in addition to a number of the efforts that Dr. Behar mentioned, we recognize that if we want to really push the equation on equity, we have to also be unlocking skills-related opportunities for our aunties and our uncles and our folks that are back out there in the communities where many of us come from. So Dr. Rosenberg challenged our team to think really differently, and he said, just go for it. Build out an ultralight program that can upskill folks, that delivers them into jobs in a rapid timing. And we actually did that. We created this program called UpLabs. It stands for Urban Potential Laboratories. The most important word there is potential. And the idea that over the course of 14 weeks, we can upskill folks. They don't have to be FIU students. They can be our friends. They can be our neighbors. They can be that person we know that's back out in the community that has been disconnected from where there are tremendous opportunities. And we're now actually into our third cohort of UpLabs. And specifically, we're retraining people for opportunities in the healthcare sector. We looked at where are the opportunities in Miami. We looked at what the Economic Development Agency said, and we knew that healthcare is a major, major growth sector. So for that friend or family member or community member we know that maybe is stuck in a dead-end opportunity, we're able to upskill them in 14 weeks for high-paying, great benefits earning jobs in the healthcare sector. It's 100% free. It's open to any and everybody in the community. And we're also really proud that in light of the COVID-19, we were able to transition 100% of our programming for UpLabs into being virtually deployed. And when I think about UpLabs, I think about one of our participants from the first cohort named Josh, Haitian American gentleman in his 50s, who was able to go through our UpLabs program. And not only has he been able to land a job at a local hospital, he's actually now beginning to think about returning and registering to complete his undergraduate education. So we know that preceding the education gap, there's an opportunity gap. And we have a responsibility and a role to play in that. And that FIU embracing and taking responsibility for the community, yes, it starts with our students, it starts with our faculty, but it also starts with a recognition that if we want to drive equity and meaningful social justice, it means that we also, in addition to all the reforms that we talked about, police-related reforms, criminal justice-related reforms. I'm a lawyer by training. I started at the Miami-Dade Public Defender's Office. I know what that journey looks and feels like, but I also think that there's an adjacent aspect to it, which is very much about how we can bridge that out for the skills economy. And the other thing, Pablo, that I think is important is this idea of social capital. We have to create avenues through which our students can see themselves in the success of the world around us. And so one of the initiatives that we did earlier this year is through our paid internship portal, the Talent Development Network, which is a paid internship portal for all 7 academic institutions in Miami, started in part when Dr. Rosenberg chaired a coalition of all 7 academic institutions. In addition to the internship portal, we said we're going to start an effort called CEO for a Day. And we're going to provide an opportunity for students from all around South Florida to actually get meaningful shadowing opportunities with students, shadowing opportunities with CEOs. And I think about a student who's the president of Miami-Dade College's Homestead campus, who the CEO he's been able to shadow is actually the CEO of the Miami Marlins, Derek Jeter. So we know that if we want to be able to unlock and have individuals and students see themselves, their rising potential and the success of others, we have to really be able to create those social capital bridges. And we know overwhelmingly, that's one of those elements of success in the academy, this idea of, do we have people that are investing in us, and not only in the classroom, but also investing, mentoring us and sponsoring us and helping to shepherd us in our journey. And so UpLabs is one component of that with what we're doing in the skills economy. We just got an announcement from a funder that we're actually going to be able to have 2 more cohorts of UpLabs. So if you're interested, hit me up, sife@fiu.edu. I gave my cell phone number out. I'm on the gram. I'm on Snapchat. I'm on every TikTok. You can find me wherever you need to be. I'm your VP of engagement, not disengagement. So we're interested in the skills economy, not just for our students and faculty and our stakeholders, but also for our family members, for our friends, and for those folks in communities that oftentimes are forgotten. But for us as FIU, they're not forgotten. We're embracing, and the majority, almost all of our participants in UpLabs are not FIU students, but are actually folks from the community. And we're now into our 3rd cohort. And and people are landing jobs, high-paying jobs in healthcare, and we're pushing our anchor institution partners to do better by hiring our folks that are coming through these types of bridge programs in the skills economy. Because the future of work doesn't mean skills alone doesn't mean enough if we're not affirming and reaffirming of every single person in our community.
Thank you, Saif. And I know that you're going to be posting a lot of that and people are going to be able to find that information. So in the spirit of the recent NASA launch that we just all enjoyed and seeing our astronauts in space, we have T-minus 5 minutes. I have a couple of questions that I want to make sure we get out there. This one is for Chief. You know, Saif just mentioned, and we've heard it throughout the conversation today in terms of building bridges, building relationships, building these conversations. And, you know, Chief, as we scan all of the news stations, we see dozens of examples of what's taking place with these protests, right? And we're seeing a very different approach to how police are engaging in these protests and how they're engaging the public and those that are protesting. We've seen some police take a knee and kneel down, and we've seen others walk with the protesters in solidarity, and others have taken a different approach. And we still understand and we recognize, and we see it in the Q&A, there's this sense of, you know, how are we going to be able to build these relationships with our own police department at FIU that's going to ensure that not only are we safe, but we're all together and we're all unified. And as the leader of our police department, Chief, what's your message to the students? What's your message to the faculty, in particular to the police officers that work for you?
Well, what's interesting is that I think this is the first time you've seen that in our country. With previous issues that we've had in manifestation, it's always been somewhat of an us against them, somewhat of a, let me see what you're talking about, but really still somewhat of a divide. I've never seen an issue where we feel so similarly about what occurred. We feel so similarly about what happened to George Floyd. And you saw it on Saturday, and I was there at one of those protests on Saturday, where we actually, the chiefs of police from various departments across the country, there were 22 of us there, we actually took a knee in prayer along with the protesters. Soon after that, you saw other leaders walking with the protesters, like you mentioned, others taking knees along with them. And what we understand is that, you know, even as much as you've always known it, when your officers see your actions, there's an effect on them as well. They realize that it's okay to do these things. We're not crossing a line that we shouldn't be crossing, and show an engagement and a solidarity and an understanding of what people are going through. And we're understanding that we reach them better that way. One of the things that I would love to see come out of that, and you're already going to see it in the Miami-Dade County Association of Chiefs of Police with the council that they're putting together, but I would love to see that here at FIU is one of the things that I think there's somewhat of a gap is, while we may try to have empathy, try to understand, we can't understand. We can't have empathy because I've never walked with those people. I've never experienced what some of our students have experienced in their daily lives. So I would love for our students, and I do this every year and I try to engage, but I would love for our students to invite me into their safe spaces, invite me into your student group meetings, and share, so I can hear and share those experiences with you, so I can understand and hear where you're coming from, and little by little start to bring more and more of my officers, because by hearing what you go through, we kind of have a better understanding of how our actions could impact you. So I'd love to see that. I'd love to see that come out of this as a more sustained bridge building, if you would, or engagement. And, you know, we use those terms. The bottom line is I want a good relationship with our university community, and that's how you do that. You do it in that way. Thank you, Chief. So the last question for the panel is going to go to our Vice President of Human Resources, Elpanya Hudson. So Elpanya, you know, we've talked here that today's about action, right? Today's about what are the next steps, and we hope that those that have participated in the conversation have seen that there's quite a bit that's taking place. One of the questions was a very straightforward question. And we've talked about the need to bring together the faculty, the staff, and the students. Is there a possibility? Is there a way that we can put together an ally group that's representative of faculty, staff, and students, so that we can continue these conversations or create a platform for an ongoing voice for the university at large?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the opportunity. We're hearing that a lot. What can we do? What action steps are next? And that's what's going to be the differentiator between this and all the situations that have happened before. So we want to acknowledge the pain, right? Because there's been pain in our communities, right? We want to amplify our voices together, that, you know, the outrage over these atrocities, which make us feel like we matter when we hear the voices of each other, and then learn before we assume. And that's what we can do through creating the ally groups. And so I'm not as connected on social media as my colleague Saif, but you can reach me. We are going to be putting together an ally group with faculty, staff, for students, so we can, as I think Artrice said it earlier, you know, how can we be connected and have those conversations. And so please, 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 you'll be look to see that communication come out from us. We want to do it, and it'll be rapid, because as Dr. Behar says, we don't rest on our laurels. We don't have our heads on the pillows. We are, you know, urgently about moving forward. So definitely, probably you'll see that coming out from our office.
Thank you, Alpana, and I think that it's important for us to all recognize and acknowledge the fact that we must, right, produce ongoing communications and allow the FIU community to see what has been done, not only as a result of this conversation, but of ongoing conversations and things that we've committed to doing. Regrettably, we've hit the 2-hour mark of our first in a series of town halls. I don't know about the rest of you. I'm exhausted. And I'm exhausted because these types of town halls really put us in a opportunity to try to get as much information out there and answer as many questions that we have. But just scanning through the Q&A, we know that there are a lot of questions that were not answered. And I want to remind everyone, this is just the first in a series of town halls. I want to also remind you that the questions that were not answered are going to be answered and are going to be posted on a forum that are going to allow you to continue to ask more questions and ask tougher questions. We don't want to run away from those questions. I want to thank the panelists for participating, for your insight, for your commitment, for your passion, for your honesty. A very special thank you to our students, to Alexandra, Benny, and Artrice for speaking, for your strong voice, for your leadership, for showing us a better way, for enlightening us as much as we need to be. So we thank you all. And with that, though, I want to pass it on to our president, Mark Rosenberg, for final thoughts.
Dr. Ortiz, thank you. You have had a very difficult job, and you've earned your exhaustion. So thank you. And I want to thank everybody for being on this, being connected. Clearly, Artrice, Alexandra, and Benny, thank you. We're here for our students. We're here to make a better world for our students. And so we're listening. Make no mistake, we're also here because of the unacceptable deaths that have occurred, including most recently George Floyd. We cannot accept institutional racism. It is entirely inconsistent with who we are and what we aspire to at this university and in this community. The better angels in us understand that, and now we got to go to work even more. We got to double down to do better, and conversations such as this, coupled with action, that are going to get us there. So judge us, not just by our words, but judge us by our deeds. This is a process which starts today. I would very much appreciate you looking at the proposed action steps. They're just proposed. This is a draft, but we're going to move very quick on the things that we know we can improve, working collaboratively with students, with our professional staff, with our faculty. So I want to thank you. I want to remind you that the cause requires care and concern. We are in a global pandemic. And we don't want to lose any of you because you failed to follow the rules of this pandemic survival, regardless of the other difficult situations out there. And I'm particularly thinking of our wonderful students. And we know you have loved ones behind you who are counting on you to get it right, particularly in this pandemic circumstance. So thank you all very much. We will be following up. We know there'll be many more conversations and much more action. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. And with that, we conclude our town hall. As I mentioned, the first of many. We look forward to engaging in ongoing conversations. We wish you all a wonderful weekend. Yes, it is Friday, in case we've forgotten. So we wish you all a wonderful weekend. And as we've been saying, and they're saying all around this country, we will keep our foot on the pedal, and we will make sure that we are part of the change that this country so desperately needs. So with that, thank you very much, everyone, and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.